So this is really fun for me to welcome this extremely special group of guests to continue with this plenary discussion and build upon these, fun themes about, how people are both experiencing peace at the youngest of ages, how we are communicating about our work in all parts of the world. And for those of you who have been a part of AFP, or if you're just joining us, we have been on a journey as an alliance for several years now, thinking about how to communicate about peace and peace building. And there was a session last year at PeaceCon where we actually revealed some social science research that we looked at the framing of peace. We researched mostly for a US-based audience and mostly looking at peace in the context of US foreign policy, but there was a lot of learning that was applicable to peace domestically, peace in other countries, just basic framing advice. And what I mean by that is, what is the way that we give a context for understanding what we mean? Because of course, peace and peace building, we use those words a lot. At that same session that I was talking about when we were all sitting in a circle yesterday, one of my colleagues was like, we keep using this word. I don't know what this word means, truly, and was joining us at a peace building conference. But we did learn a couple of things. We learned that we need to make sure that our audiences, no matter who they are, understand that peace is active. Because we do know that we can trigger an understanding of peace, which is about inner peace, meditation, sitting quietly. That is a word and a part of understanding, but we want to activate the building part of peace building. So they said, use that word a lot, building, or building peace. There were certain values that seemed to resonate across the board: interdependence, how we connect with each other. And so we've been trying to incorporate these lessons into the way that we communicate about peace and peace building. And so it is such an honor for me to have a group of folks who also think deeply about how to communicate about issues, about complex issues, social issues like peace. And some of the lessons that we've had about reaching a very general audience that does not live and breathe peace and peace building like we all do. And so of course, those of us, there's different audiences. We're wonky, we have evidence, we want to talk about programs that work, but at the same time, we want to have a movement mindset. We want people to feel that they can be a part of a peace building movement, an agenda, that peace is something everyone can connect with. And these different communications challenges are really hard for us to put into practice. So I have Marjorie. I'm not going to go through all of the bios. Hopefully you've looked through all of it in the conference materials. But Marjorie, who is the new president of Search for Common Ground, Doug from Buena, and my dear colleague Shayla, who's on the board of PartnersGlobal, where a lot of this work was seeded, and also executive vice president. I'm not going to get the full person. We've changed a couple of times, but a public relations and communications professional working with a lot of different firms and countries and clients. So we're going to have a conversation about some of the challenges that they've faced and some of the lessons learned that hopefully we can all apply, and then we have a very special announcement at the end of the session. So I'm going to ask each of them a question, meaning I'm going to ask one question. We're all going to have a conversation about it, and we're going to have a couple of little multimedia things for you to look at. So I'm going to ask my first question, and then we're going to watch a little video. So the first question to the panel is, in your experience, what does make a successful public-facing campaign for a complex social issue like peace building that succeeds in getting a large number of the public meaningfully involved in the issue? And maybe you can give an example. Okay, sometimes this type of public facing campaigns make those of us social change agents and technocratic experts, we feel slightly uncomfortable. So I'm going to show you a video that I'm prepping you a little bit too much, but let's go ahead and watch a video, and then I'm going to ask the panel to answer.
Even so, come, Lord Jesus. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Amen. There. That's my story.
You've done so many good things.
It's a great story.
Yeah, and so long.
You're all too kind. Now, you go. How did you get here? Tell us everything.
Okay. I was born in a small suburb outside Stockholm. I had a normal childhood, I guess. Well, I was the middle child, so that was pretty rough at times. And when I graduated from school, I traveled to Australia for a couple of months.
Volunteering, I suppose.
No, just partying and surfing. Well, yeah. So when I got back, I started to look for a job. I'm still searching. Well, anyway, one day I saw this banner from UNICEF, and it said that I could save children's lives. So I clicked it. And here I am.
Great story.
It's like your entire life led to that single moment when you saved those children.
Guess I'm a late bloomer, huh?
You may be a late bloomer, but when you bloom, you blossom.
It feels almost too simple. Thanks, guys.
Köp dina julklappar på unicef.se.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Marjorie to go first, because if you didn't know, she had a long career with UNICEF before she joined Search. So Marjorie, go ahead.
Right, so the moral of that story is there's quite a low bar to heaven if you subscribe to UNICEF, right? Everybody can get there. But maybe just to represent the fact that today I'm representing Search for Common Ground, and I should just quickly say recently merged with an organization called Preemptive Love Coalition, a community people-to-people peacebuilding initiative that uses the phrase love anyway. So Search and PLC are coming together from two very different places. But from my history in communication, I started my professional life in advertising. A professor of mine told me something that stuck with me my entire life, and it was, if you want to talk to fish, don't skyrocket. And that has basically been one of the guiding principles of good communication, which is know your audience, know how to connect with them, and keep it simple, because people are busy, and they don't get up every day focused on your particular issue. The other thing I learned from working in UNICEF, which, as you know, is part of the UN system, that was produced by the Swedish National Committee for UNICEF with some freedom to be irreverent, because UNICEF itself would have offended everybody with that ad, and couldn't possibly do that. But the magic was that we had a network of national NGOs who knew their audience and who tested. And I'll just say something about why Mother Teresa and Gandhi represented, was because at the time, the market research told us that there were three characters in the world that the public trusted very deeply: Mother Teresa, Gandhi, and Mandela. We didn't have the right to Mandela's image, but we could use those two. So that there was real market research behind that ad.
Go ahead, Doug.
Great. It's an honor to be here. As you can see, I'm kind of an outsider, so I really appreciate the opportunity to share thoughts here. So I as well have spent my career in advertising and continue it now. Worked on some of the biggest brands in the world, and have very much enjoyed now dedicating all of my time to applying that same thinking that you'd apply to a giant brand to a cause. And exactly the simplicity of that. We have an axiom that we go by called the OMG axiom, which is if you can say it in a sentence and tell it to a stranger and get an OMG, then like you should continue. And if you don't, then you need to step back and like figure how you can fix that. And there's a lot of things inside that, which is, can you say it in a succinct way? You know, Albert Einstein was big on that. Like, you haven't understood what you're working on unless you can explain it to a child, and that child understands. So you can say it in a really simple way, and the fact that you can still be unique and compelling when you've boiled it down in such a small way to a stranger it's gone a long way for us in being able to figure out how to make a compelling message. I think another one, especially in complicated causes like peace building, is defining a sharp enemy. And it doesn't have to be a person or group of people or even like a bad thing necessarily, but defining the thing very specifically that you're going against. It can be extremely hard, but it can make a huge difference in the cause, in the effectiveness of that cause. So I'll probably leave it at that. It's the two things we focus on.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And thank you to Marjorie and to Doug for, I think, really great insights on how to say this very simply. Before I kind of did this a little bit backwards, because I actually came into advertising and communications and public relations from the diplomatic world. I was a diplomat with the State Department and a staffer at the White House for 12 years. I worked in Haiti, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in places where, again, the conversation about peace building is incredibly complicated. So I think when we stand up here and say, well, it has to be simple, it has to be direct, there's a core narrative, I understand that can sound a little disingenuous, but I think there is something to that. Wherever I worked in the world, where I was talking with little kids in Cité Soleil, when you're talking with mothers in Iraq, when you're talking with women in Afghanistan, there is an idea of what is normal. And that's really what peace building at its heart is trying to get back to, is what is your perception of normal? And that's where, and when you find those gaps and you find that some of those sort of disconnects on what does normal mean, that's where sometimes a lot of the missteps with campaigns come in. So one of the great things I've learned through my involvement, thanks to Julia, with PartnersGlobal and their work with reframing the peace narrative, is really diving into what does that core narrative really mean? What does it mean to different groups? And I think more importantly, what is the research and the data to really get to hearts and minds of what do you mean by normal? Kids want to go back to school. That's what they see as peace. That's what they see as normal, and peace building is the path to do that. Mothers want to feel like they can work and support their families, and that peace building is the path back to that. So I think a lot of what we're trying to do here, whether it's through a campaign, whether it's through communication, is reassure people that there is a normal out there, whatever. But really, it's understanding what that normal really means, and that's where I think some of that reframing piece work really kind of gets into hearts and minds. That's something we do in advertising, actually, is we do tons of strategic work, focus groups, data and research to really understand how people think, how they feel, what are those behavioral steps, those proof points along a journey that really mean we are working towards peace, we are trust us, we're on a journey together. But it's also the emotional part of it too. It's what am I feeling is peace? What am I thinking about when I say peace? And that to me is what are the hallmarks of a successful campaign, is looking at those behavioral steps, those proof points along the way, but also really understanding what are in people's minds when they say, I want peace.
Yeah, and all of these words have such power, right? I mean, what we've been saying a lot is, different things, they just trigger things in different people's minds. So then part of it is what we were talking about this morning, about just curiosity then to say, well, what do you mean by that word? So, Doug's point about you need to find an enemy, wow, did I have a hard time with that one when I was learning about narrative constructs, and that there's usually a villain in a good story. and what really makes you feel emotional. And a villain doesn't have to be a person, but it is a truism about the narrative arcs that you have the struggle, you have something you're against, you're pushing for it, you're struggling. It can be it can be a system, you have to name whatever that challenge is. But these are things we do not feel super comfortable with as peace builders, quite honestly. These truisms about storytelling, narrative arcs, and good communications and advertising. And so I'm going to ask a second question, and then we're going to watch a second video, because I really do want to step into these tensions, because this is not easy work. So we know that there are trade-offs that we make. There are tensions, there are roadblocks. Probably all of you have experienced them when working with professionals like professional peace builders. And I always think about the example of using humor. Using humor like we just saw, and you all were laughing at that video. You know, it makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable when we're talking about very serious topics where people's lives are at stake. There's you know, the tension of like needing to raise the heat when we want to jar people out of complacency. Actually, that's what we're gripping them with our communications, but at the same time we're trying to lower the heat so we can get to a place of dialogue. So there's a whole bunch of needing to navigate tensions as we are designing these campaigns. And so we're going to watch one more video, and then I'm going to start with Doug first.
그리움과 뜨거운 경모의 정을 담아 위대한 김일성 동지와 김정일 동지께 가장 숭고한 경의와 새해 인사를 삼가드립니다.
There's a new and unconventional effort
to get information into North Korea
by sneaking information into the country on USB drives.
Human rights activists are now collecting old USB sticks,
urging people to donate their old flash drives by popping them in these slots.
Pack it with information, whether it's Wikipedia,
movies, TV shows, ebooks,
in a bid, obviously, to undermine the regime's lies and propaganda, which it feeds to its own people every single day.
To open up their eyes to the fact that there is a world outside what they've been led to believe.
And if you think about it, that is very dangerous for Kim Jong-un, because if people get a sense that the image of America that he has carefully painted for them is false, he could have huge problems.
김정일 동지께 큰소를 위한 투쟁에 고귀한 생을 바친
We believe that freedom of information is a fundamental right. Without accessing information, it's impossible to form your own consciousness.
Of course, watching this information helped me to realize there was some humanity out there.
If we continue and expand our activity of disseminating information to educate North Korean people in the long run, I'm absolutely sure that North Korean people one day would stand up to change the course.
Go ahead. So go ahead, Doug. Doug is the creative agency that worked on Flash Drivers for Freedom together with the human rights organization that got a whole bunch of unpaid media for this campaign. Yes. So go ahead.
And it's actually 7 years ago, and it's still going on today. I get people will say, "Hey, I just saw this in it was at the top of Reddit today," and here we are 7 years later. That came about from reading an article about the Human Rights Foundation and that they were trying to do this work in North Korea, and I emailed them and said, "Hey, I want to join." And a few weeks later, we built that and put it at the South by Southwest Festival, and it was like USA Today said, "Obama, NASA, and Flash Drives for Freedom are our favorite things this year," and like just the power of move fast, break things. You know, like they say in Silicon Valley, just like not overthinking it too much, and just running with it. it's always a challenge to put yourself out there. Like, human rights, you could say is equally fraught with, all these pitfalls and all these donors that you could offend, and all these constituents that need to have their thoughts like very, very carefully addressed. And power to Human Rights Foundation for having the courage to do that, because it has been immensely successful for them. It led to them overhauling their brand to talk the way that they felt, and they've grown multiple times over since that started. Obviously not just because of that, but because of that mentality of being able to embrace simplicity, embrace boldness in that. So in peacebuilding, yes, it's just so hard to take that risk, but it can truly make an impact.
Go next.
I'll say I couldn't agree more, because one of the things I think we found with roadblocks to peacebuilding is fatigue. People, sorry, better. One of the roadblocks you find with building peace is fatigue. People get tired of talking about conflict. It's unfortunate. And it comes unfortunately at a time when you frankly need to mobilize groups like the private sector, like governments, and like so many other key stakeholders that need to stay involved with the process. So I think campaigns like that, where you push the envelope, where you reframe thinking, where you look at sort of what those gaps are so much more important. And it really, I think, gives people hope among a pretty bleak landscape. I mean, I saw this morning that, for example, the WHO finally lifted the global public health emergency on COVID. And not to bring this all back to COVID, because I feel like everything's been about COVID for 3 years, but we've been living under conflict for 3 years. Every single person in this room, every person online, and it gets tiring. And I think campaigns like that help you think a little bit differently about what's going on. I mean, when you think about 4 out of 10 Americans saying that we live in end times, according to Pew, it's pretty bleak. And I think we need the power of those fresh narratives, of thinking about things differently, turning things on their ear, to really freshen our perspectives on how we keep going on this peace-building journey.
Thank you, Sheila.
One of the experiences I've had, when you work with people with deep expertise, there's always a challenge about what to leave out. Because they continually want to tell everybody everything they know, all at once. So that's been one of the tensions. And trying to be politically correct and not offend anybody is always the other tension. And if you want a campaign to actually connect with people, you have to somehow rise above the noise. I mean, there's so much that people have coming at them, and they don't get out of bed thinking about the thing you do every day. So you do have to make compromises and be selective and be prepared to startle people. And, for the first question, I think I'd just like to remind everybody about the campaign to ban landmines.
Yes.
This started with one human being, one person, who got a flyer at a metro stop one day that woke her up to the fact that this was a big problem in the world. But it took 5 years to win that campaign. And that's the other thing. You're not going to win the whole war with one campaign. And you have to be prepared to be extremely strategic. So those choices, those imply real choices, and experts have trouble holding back from telling everybody everything all at once.
So true. I've fallen into that. My friends, what I would love to do is maybe skip our third question. Do you mind? We're at 11:15, because I really would love to hear from the audience. Maybe about 10 minutes of questions. Maybe we'll take, questions, comments, all at once, and then we'll have the three of you react to what folks are kind of percolating in the audience about. So I see 2 hands up. Can we 3? And then if those of you in the Zoomlandia would like to put in the chat a question, we invite your comments as well. So we're going to take all of the questions all at once, and then we'll just see which ones you're inspired to respond to. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the conversation. I'm Stephen Gray from Adapt Peacebuilding, and thank you for asking that question, what does peace mean? I think it's a fascinating question, and it really, I think it opens a lot of doors to understanding where we are in relation to this work, what kind of work we do and what matters. And thank you for the comments about getting back to normal. I think it's really important that we center the lived experience of people when we're talking about peace. This is something that we work on policies for, we work on politics for, but ultimately it's about improving people's lives. And so my question is about how you communicate that. I'm curious whether when we are trying to share what we do and promote what we do, is the way of describing peace as being free from fear, being free from violence, getting back to a normal, a rights-based conception in people's lives. Do people connect with that? The people that have resources, do they connect with that idea? And the second part to that question is, we would like to tell a hopeful message about people's lives and what's possible in people's lives. But there's another way to tell their story, which is about the alarm and the urgency and the injustice and the wrongness of what they're experiencing, which has a completely different emotional tone to it. So do people respond to that negative conception, or do they respond to the hopeful message?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe we'll take, yeah, go ahead, Susan.
Thank you so much for this, really fascinating. I'm Susan Allen. I'm at the Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. In a couple weeks, I'm becoming the director of our graduate programs, and one of my jobs will be to market and tell the story of higher education, graduate degrees in the peace and conflict resolution field. What advice can you give me as I start to get my head around telling people all around the world that they can come study peace and conflict resolution for a graduate degree?
All right, last one here with Mark, and if there's any. Oh, yeah, go quickly, yeah.
My name is Sanjay Fernandez. I'm from Seoul, Colombia. I think many of us have very good stories, and maybe we've even managed to make them simple. But in the world of noise that there is nowadays, you need to have a lot of money for people to hear your story. What would be 2 things that you would do, and what would be 2 things that you wouldn't do if you're a small organization trying to get your message out? How would you use your money best?
Great question. All right, Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Julia. Mark Summers, a consultant, been working in peacebuilding for a long time. I just was sort of reflecting on the trend in this world with regards to your messaging that you're I actually have big questions about whether the return to normal is what peace really is, because systemic, what we see after wars so often is that the causes, the systemic causes that created war are reinserted by elites in those countries. So I have big questions about whether normality is really what we should be going for, but that's just my experience. The other question, the other thought I had when you were talking is, there's some study that came out that said the number of human beings who are living under repressive states has gone from 2012, so 11 years ago, was 48% of humanity, and now it's 11 years later, it's 72% of humanity. So your audience is really narrowing fast for where you can do this, because repression is so high. And I think one of the things that I think is going to be a big challenge for what you're trying to do going forward is misinformation in AI. You know, the question is, what will people believe, particularly when you have repressive states taking over this planet? I mean, it's really swift what's going on. So
thank you. Thank you, Mark. Okay, you guys get to pick what you want to answer.
I'll start with the first question, but I'm going to touch a little bit on that last one because I think I really would like to open up this idea of peace being normal. I think you're absolutely right. And this is where I think the work of Partners Global in talking with people, doing that research, diving into those gaps of what is normal. Everybody has their own concept of what normal is. It could be, for some people, it's living under sort of what that old system was that perpetuated old feelings and old stereotypes. But then, again, I worked in Haiti for many, many years. Things are so bad now, unfortunately, that people look at the Duvalier era as, well, that was pretty good because, yes, things were bad and human rights were under threat, but my kids could play in the streets, they went to school, there was some kind of order to what was going on. I think you and I could argue that was certainly not an ideal way to live, but you have to look at what the relativism is now, and that seems like a normal, peaceful time to frankly, a lot of people right now. And that's unfortunately, as authoritarianism grows, people are looking back to what were frankly not great times and saying, well, that felt pretty good. That was something I would like to aspire to, and that was peace in my mind. But that's where I think that unpacking that becomes so important. And then I think to your question about sort of how do you reconcile in some ways those sort of proof points about peace, like what does that really look like with how do you not gloss over the circumstances that led to the chaos that created the need for the peace building. I think frankly a lot of that really comes from part of that comes from understanding who are those different stakeholders and how do you map those out when you talk about peace. Again, when I worked in Haiti and when I worked in Iraq, governments were not enjoying a lot of confidence and trust from the people at that point, let's just say. That was not the messenger that you wanted to hear from. But it was really kind of understanding who were those NGOs, who were those spokespeople, whom did people trust to sort of say, well, if they're doing this, that's my reassurance. And it was things like little kids going to school, and that's where I think working with journalists became so, so important for all of us in showcasing not just the official word, but doing feature reporting. And again, I'm a big fan of feature reporting because to me it does show those very human, tangible proof points of these are things that we can talk about that show what's going on. We worked with journalists in Haiti and Iraq, for example, to talk to little kids that were going to school. They had never interviewed kids before because why would you interview kids? But when they actually got kids to open up and tell those stories on camera of things are getting better, I can dream. One little boy said, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be president, I want to do all these things, but I couldn't do it before because I was afraid to go to school. And that to me was one of the most powerful sort of evidentiary points of we really might be on a path to something better here. It was showing those little girls going to school. Some of it you can arguably say is, well, that's just one microcosm of what's going on, but to me, working in diplomacy for 12 years in conflict zones, it's kind of amazing how contagious that could be too, and how that does create proof, it creates hope, it creates that desire to replicate. But it also means you have to talk to people that you didn't realize could be your allies. In northern Iraq, for example, when we were talking about FGM, our biggest allies were fathers and the head of the Fatwa Council. The head of the Fatwa Council was actually one of our biggest allies when it came to ending an absolutely horrific practice, which was being passed from women to women. And that was a really critical thing in peace building, was you have to talk to people that you didn't know, frankly, could be on your side because they have a stake in what's going on. And that's, I think, one of the ways that we can start to acknowledge that. The third thing I'll just say very quickly about how do you acknowledge what's going on and how do you sort of bring that to truth, that's where you have to have faith in a process. And that's where, again, government comes back in. It's not just about acknowledging the horror of what's gone on, but what's the path to reconciliation? How do you build resilience? Again, great work by Partners Global to sort of plug them in terms of building that base of resilience of what are we learning from this? How are we moving on? How are we frankly changing society for the better and creating a better normal in some ways by moving on from this? And I think that's where we can start to learn those lessons from peace building and I think create a lot of proof and trust back in the system.
I could maybe as you did the first and the last question, I'll speak to the I'll speak to the second and the third, which is what do you tell up and coming students and like where do you put your money in a finite resources. Those are actually very connected. I don't know how you guys feel, but I hate ads. Like I hate looking at an ad, and I work in advertising, and so. starting there, that like nobody cares, and so knowing that you can't just put something, you know, that an expert feels like you want to get out and everything. You can't just put that in a banner and expect it to make an impact. Start with, I love telling this to students, like start with an unexpected combination. Take two things that don't belong together and like mash them and find a way to have them fit. Try it with something else, some other combination, and see what comes out of that. You know, a flash drive in Kim Jong-un's mouth is a very bizarre combination. And so with money, like there's a pyramid. If you can simplify it into, you know, you have awareness at the top, that's the broadest, then you have education in the middle, and then you have conversion at the bottom. When you do get down to conversion, meaning like somebody signing up or somebody becoming a donor, you do have to, that's where your money can be the most effective, but it's very hard to get to somebody to that bottom of the pyramid without the top. So when you're at the top, consider ways that you can be so unexpected that you don't need to pay for that, and then filter down and like you find your audience and things through that. And then real quick on the last comment about AI and the problems of misinformation with that, I had the pleasure of meeting the Minister of Digital from Taiwan. She was newly appointed, and they were using memes to fight misinformation, and just the power of flipping the misinformation on itself, you know, using the same tools and mechanisms they found very effective, and you know, and finding ways to do that in other ways is really effective as well.
These are all really tough questions, but a couple of things. Setting a clear goal, I think, is the absolute necessity, and remembering that marketing and communications is not an end in itself. It's the enabler of the achievement of whatever that goal is. So if you go back to the landmine campaign, it was successful. Why was it successful? There was an absolutely crystal clear goal, and there was a multi-pronged strategy to achieve it. And it was to bring inside the halls of diplomacy the voice of thousands and thousands of people around the world. And you cannot do this alone. If you really have a big audacious goal like ban landmines, you have to build a movement, and you have to be sure that you use marketing and communication strategically when it's the right thing to do to support the achievement of the goal. But the goal itself is a much bigger thing than clever marketing. And when your goal isn't clear, your journey there, any road will get you there, right? And it'll cost you a lot of money, and you will not succeed. So the less money you have, the better research, the better planning, and the better very, very careful choices you need to make about where to put that money.
Okay, I have a couple of things to say too, really quickly. One piece of research that we've definitely learned from narrative science is that negative emotions do not motivate. So that is, you know, we talk about like levels of violence, all of the bad things and the crisis, and people just look away. They do look away. So but you have to, you build it in. So you know, you can't not say that these things are happening, but the agency that people feel that they can do something about it, that's the key, right? And so what we're all talking about, whether it's hope, whether it's optimism, we have to build a sense of agency, and that's where young people need to feel like, study this, because you will be able to make a difference in your communities, of course. And then, you know, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is Mark's point about the rise of oppression. Because we know that one of the tools in the toolbox of any authoritarian regime is to make us doubt the truth, it's to distrust each other, and to not feel that we can make a difference. And so what part of our job is, no matter where we are working, is this sense of hopefulness, and is to remind people in whatever country, wherever they find themselves, that they can make a difference. And so these campaigns look very different. You know, the biggest kind of example of us is under the Pinochet regime in Chile with the No campaign. And if you all haven't seen, it was a no to a referendum to keep Pinochet as the dictator. Please watch the documentary. Well, it's not a documentary, it's a movie. It's a film about the marketing agency who designed the No campaign. But the other thing I was thinking about is dissidents in Russia right now. And I can't even remember what the little muñecos are called, the little Play-Doh forms that they're making and just leaving in parts of the cities. And of course, the police come and they take them down, and then they keep popping up. They take a picture of them, don't say anything, put them up on an Instagram account. This is subversive right now because it's reminding people, no, we're here. We are here. We are against the war. And there's a symbolism and a messaging that happens in some of the most dangerous places. So the communication still has to continue. And luckily, we are not yet in this situation in the United States, and the Alliance for Peacebuilding is at a moment where we have been working with the board and several members and partnering with creatives like Doug, because this is the other thing I wanted to say. If you don't have a big budget, look for the good partnerships, because they're out there of other people who have different talents than we do. Luminate, the foundation Luminate, just put out this fantastic report on how social change agents can partner with creative agencies in Kenya. Do's and don'ts about how to partner with people like Doug. It literally came out this week, and it's applicable to any of us doing this work. So I think when you don't have a small budget, you also need to find the partnerships with the creative people who think differently about this than you do, which is what we've been doing at the Alliance. And so I'm gonna
Can I just jump in on that?
Yes.
Don't discount the private sector either. I mean, if you can't spend your own money, spend somebody else's money.
Yeah.
But the private sector has a huge interest in peace building.
Yeah.
There is not opportunity for them without stability. So when your interests align, see if those interests can meet up and get your message across, as part of what they're trying to accomplish as well.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to turn over to Doug for our quick little announcement, and then we're going to send you all on your break.
All right, great. I wish we could continue this because there's lots of more conversation, and I really love the questions. So we have been working in the shadows in the back for 2 years now, and years before that with the research that Julia's been leading. On a coalition that we have been building, and if you can't tell, I'm like way overwearing it today. But it is based on years of research and based on a lot of things that we've been talking about today on the power of flipping the script, on using the same mechanisms of hate to fight hate. It is something that could feel very uncomfortable. When we shared this with the board, and Nick shared some really great insights on it that have helped shape where we're going with it. But it is intended to be uncomfortable. But it is intended to take peace building. To remove that squiggly line under peace building, to have people realize that they can be peace builders even if they don't know what that term means. So it's a campaign at the top of the pyramid there, of the inverted pyramid of the awareness. It's about getting a lot more people into this movement, making this audience much larger, so that you all have access to those individuals so that they can develop a much deeper involvement in this amazing cause. So without revealing too much before we show the film, I'll keep it at that.
Yeah. I'll say more after you watch a little movie.
And I will as well, if that's right. They didn't get up and leave the room yet. That was kind of an assault of squished all together in 90 seconds there. But I think the main takeaway to come from this room is this is very much a coalition collaboration. We want to use the Peace Force to bring in all these kinds of people to amplify causes that you've already, or like campaigns that you've already launched, campaigns that you want to launch. Sometimes it is kind of the bizarre, perfume that smells like hate kind of campaigns that we will do through this, but sometimes it is very hard-hitting initiatives that you are all leading the charge for. So very much looking forward to hearing from you all on ways that we can collaborate on that, and would love for all of us to enlist together.
So there's actually a booth at the end of the hall here. There, you got to show them your T-shirt. There's a whole bunch of different Peace Force T-shirts. If you enlist, you get a T-shirt for Peace Force. And the concept is this. The Alliance for Peacebuilding has never done a public-facing campaign like this. And so kudos to the staff and Liz's leadership and to the board for trying something new, truly wanting to build a platform where we have this both awareness building but opportunities to really highlight all of the good work of Alliance members, the partnerships that you want to highlight, actions that you want to kind of activate, and the idea is these monthly drops with the Peace Force that hopefully will generate buzz and continue to offer these partnership opportunities. Look in the back to Nick is going to wave at you. He's also wearing a Peace Force T-shirt. Wave again. You can talk to him about these partnership opportunities. Go find out more at the booth. There'll be people there all day talking about it. You can enlist and get a shirt. So thank you to Doug. Thank you to our panelists. Keep the conversation going, please, with them about kind of questions that I know you still have. So thank you very much. What's that? It's in the social room. Yeah. Anything else? Any information about breaks?
And last thing to say on that is anyone that would like to sign up today, we did bring a suitcase full of shirts that includes.